So I have a question for you. Have you ever wanted something so bad? Yes, all right. Yeah, I know what we wanted yesterday. Have you ever wanted something so bad only to find out that what you wanted ended up being something not what you expected? Yes. So, yeah, when it comes to some food things, I want to tell you a little bit. I love buffalo chicken, right? I love buffalo sauce and I love chicken. I should say I like buffalo sauce, I love chicken, because you like food, you love people. That's what an old friend of mine used to say. But I really like buffalo sauce and chicken. And so one of my favorite pizza places, and I know this is very generic, but I really like them. I got hooked on them in college, is Papa John's Pizza. Okay. Obviously, I'm not the only one. And the closest one is in Omaha. And a while back, they came out with a buffalo chicken pizza. I'm like, all those things together sounds amazing. And so I decided that I was going to order my very first buffalo chicken pizza, and I was going to order it on a Monday night and watch it with Monday Night Football, and it was like just going to be like the perfect situation. But I'm kind of unique, and I don't even understand sometimes my taste buds. I don't understand why I like certain foods and don't like certain foods, and like I don't like chunky stuff, because like when I make my own spaghetti sauce, what I like is I like powder, like onion powder, garlic powder, oregano powder. I don't like leaves. I don't like things that look like little pieces of tree in my sauce, all right? So, and it's weird, because then I'll turn around, and if I can have a good burger, I like a big piece of onion on my burger, all right? So it's weird, right? I don't understand it. So I order the pizza. I sit down with the box in front of me, getting ready to watch Monday Night Football. Been waiting for this moment. Could taste whatever that buffalo chicken pizza tasted like. I could taste it. And I opened the box. And there, with my buffalo chicken pizza scattered all over it, are pieces of red onion. Everywhere! Who does that to a pizza? My disappointment was like, I even called Papa John's. I said, I didn't order onions with this. Well, come to find out, I guess lots of people like onions on their pizza, and they like onions with their buffalo chicken sauce, so I was the odd person out. But what I wanted totally did not become what I expected. We've been talking about the people of Israel, and we've been talking about how they came out of Egypt, out of slavery, and God was bringing them out of slavery, and they thought, right? They thought they wanted freedom. They liked the idea of freedom. They like this idea of even maybe becoming, or they like this idea of being the people of God, right? It sounded really good. This seemed like the right thing, but they had a problem. They didn't really like the process of becoming the people of God. They liked the idea of being it, but they didn't really like the process of becoming the people of God. You see, it's in the process of getting to the life that God has created for us that we learn to trust Him. Did you know that? It's in the process of getting to the life that God has created for us that we learn to trust Him. The process. Nobody likes processes, right? But you cannot get around the process. There is no fast, instant growth with our faith. You know, when we first come to know Jesus and we first start the faith and everything sounds really good, it's exciting, and we're just like 100% into it. We like the freedom from guilt. We like the freedom from shame. We like the freedom from all the power of those things that are meant to destroy us and destroy our souls. We love the freedom. We want the freedom. But we have to understand something, that with that freedom comes a process to get us to the place where the freedom is leading us. Did you know that? with that freedom comes a process to actually get us to the place that the freedom is leading us. But a lot of people don't want the process. There's a new phrase for parenting out there. You know, we have helicopter parenting and all kinds of other names, but there's a new one called lawnmower parenting. Anybody heard of lawnmower parenting? So here's what lawnmower parenting is. Parents who do everything they can to remove every obstacle of resistance in front of their kids' lives. I've been guilty of doing this myself, right? This idea that we don't want our kids to have any kind of setbacks. We don't want them to have any kind of feelings of failures or let down or anything like that. So we remove all the obstacles. And in fact, I was reading this one article, and it was talking about there was a high school student who had their favorite water bottle, a special water bottle that they would only drink water out of. And one day they got to school without their favorite water bottle. And even though there are an enormous amount of water fountains all over the student's campus, they can't drink the water without their special water bottle. And so their mom takes time out of work to go home and get the special water bottle and get it to the school administrators so that they can take the special water bottle to the student because they might die of thirst during the day. This parent did not want any kind of resistance in their kid's life. And so what happens is we have a generation that grows up thinking that life is about no resistance. That life is about not having any kind of process to go through. And you know what happens? When you remove all those obstacles, there's nothing to learn from. There's nothing to grow from. So we end up under the surface of our lives, driven by fear and anxiety. Fear and anxiety that drives our emotions, drives our decisions, and fear and anxiety also drives our relationship with God. Do you know what happens when we raise up a generation that thinks that somebody should always be there? That somebody should always be there to remove those obstacles. What happens when no one's there? You see, it's in those moments when we face those obstacles, those resistance, those things that we go through, that we actually discover what we put our trust in. We actually discover the deepest desires of our lives. We actually discover what it is that makes us who we are. So if we don't have any of those processes we go through, well, guess what? At some point in life, we will face it. We end up in a vicious cycle. We end up in a vicious cycle where the anxiety and the fear drives everything we do. Oh. This vicious cycle is what the people of Israel find themselves in. This up and down relationship with God. God delivers them from Egypt. They wanted freedom. God brings them into the freedom. They come up against the Red Sea. God delivers them through the Red Sea, delivers them out of the hands of Pharaoh again. They need food. God delivers them and brings food to them. They need water. God delivers them and brings them water. But every time they see it, then they forget it. Then God forgives them. Then they see it, then they forget it, and God forgives them. But all of this is a process. All of this is a process that God is trying to work in their lives. So they spent a few years at Mount Sinai. And we talked about this for the last couple of Sundays. This place, this mountain where the presence of God was, and Moses, their leader, goes up and has these encounters with God. And at one point, even while Moses has gone up on the mountaintop, the people of Israel, again, forgetting what God and who God is and what God has done for them, they turn to the golden calf, right? And they worship these gods. They say, these gods brought us out of Egypt. And they forget again what God has done for them. But Moses comes down. God forgives them. God promises that he'll be with them, and God stays with them. So they move from Mount Sinai to the edge now of the promised land, the place they've been journeying toward, right? They're about to go in, they're getting ready, they're making their plans, and they decide to have 12 spies, right? They pick these 12 spies who are going to go into the land, they're going to check it out, they're supposed to come back with all these reports, they're supposed to tell them how it is, tell them what kind of food that they grow there in the land, what they're up against. And these 12 spies come back, and 10 of the 12 bring this report. It's exactly like we've always heard it is. It's a beautiful land. The soil is fertile. It's a good place to live. But it also has these people living in it that are really, really strong and very, very powerful. There is no way that we can beat them. There's no way that we can go back to this land and take it back. They're too strong and they're too powerful. Now, I said 10 out of the 12, right? 2 of the spies try to convince the people that they can do this. A guy by the name of Caleb, another guy by the name of Joshua. They try to convince the people that they can actually go in. Let's go. Let's trust God. Let's keep moving, right? How many times have we heard that over the last few weeks? Get moving, right? Caleb and Joshua are saying, let's keep moving. Let's keep trusting God. But the fear and the anxiety bubbles up amongst the people. The fear and the anxiety that's been driving their emotions, that has been driving their decisions now comes in between them and where God wants to take them. Comes between them and the life that God has created for them. So here's what happens. We're going to pick it up in Numbers chapter 13. We move to the book of Numbers, picking it up in verse 32. Listen to this. These are the 10 out of the 12. So they spread this bad report about the land among the Israelites. The land we traveled through and explored will devour anyone who goes to live there. All the people we saw were huge. That's funny, people. Come on. We even saw giants there. The descendants of Anak, right? And the descendants of Anak, there's like these mythical creatures, right? So you know, when they start talking about mythical creatures, somebody's not telling the truth. Next to them, we feel like grasshoppers. And that's what they thought too. Then the whole community began weeping aloud, and they cried all night. Their voices rose in a great chorus of protest against Moses and Aaron. Oh, if only we had died in Egypt. We heard this before, haven't we? And even here in the wilderness, they complained. Why is the Lord taking us to this country only to have us die in battle? Our wives and our little ones will be carried off as plunder. Wouldn't it be better for us to return to Egypt? Then they plotted among themselves. Let's choose a new leader and go back to Egypt. Then Moses and Aaron fell face down on the ground before the whole community of Israel. 2 of the men who had explored the land, Joshua, son of Nun, and Caleb, son of Jephunneh, tore their clothing. They said to all the people of Israel, the land we traveled through and explored is a wonderful land. And if the Lord is pleased with us, he will bring us safely into that land and give it to us. It is a rich land flowing with milk and honey. Do not rebel against the Lord, and don't be afraid of the people of the land. They are only helpless prey to us. They have no protection, but the Lord is with us. Don't be afraid of them. But the whole community began to talk about stoning Joshua and Caleb. Then the glorious presence of the Lord appeared to all the Israelites at the tabernacle. And the Lord said to Moses, "How long will these people treat me with contempt? Will they never believe me, even after all the miraculous signs I have done among them? I will disown them and destroy them with a plague. Then I will make you," talking to Moses, "into a nation greater and mightier than they." But Moses objected. "What will the Egyptians think when they hear about it?" he asked the Lord. "They know full well the power you displayed in rescuing your people from Egypt. Now if you destroy them, the Egyptians will send a report to the inhabitants of this land, who have already heard that you lived among the people. They know, Lord, that you have appeared to your people face to face, and that your pillar of cloud hovers over them. They know that you go before them in the pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night." Jump down to verse 17. He continues on, "Please, Lord, prove that your power is as great as you have claimed." I love this. Listen to these words that Moses wrote. "For you said," he's telling God, this is what you said, God, "the Lord is slow to anger and filled with unfailing love, forgiving every kind of sin and rebellion. But he does not excuse the guilty. He lays the sins of the parents upon their children. The entire family is affected, even children in the third and fourth generations. There are consequences. In keeping with your magnificent, unfailing love, please pardon the sins of this people, just as you have forgiven them ever since they left Egypt." God responds, "I will pardon them as you have requested." But he goes on to say, "I pardon them, but this generation will not see the land. I will let them live, but this is as far as they go." It's really interesting. If you were to read on in Numbers chapter 14 there to the end, even after Moses goes and tells the people, he tells them that God has said that they can live. God has said that we're not going to be able to go into the new land. And even God tells us we need to start out in a different direction, even starting back, headed toward Egypt. Even after Moses goes and tells them that, these people decide. They decide they want to go into the new land then. They're so stubborn. You see, God has put up a lot with their lack of faith. God has put up with their up and down stuff because he loves them. He's forgiven them. He's stayed with them. He's let them live. But something they do here push God's patience to a place where he finally gives them their deepest desires. After showing them his patience, after showing them his compassion, after showing them his mercy, after giving them everything they needed to live, it still wasn't enough. It still wasn't enough for them to completely trust him. It still wasn't enough for them to see past their fear and their anxiety. It's like they're like, God, you brought us through the desert. God, you gave us food. God, you gave us something to drink. God, you delivered us from the Egyptians. But this whole thing that's out ahead of us, this new land, these new people, that, no way, man, that's a deal breaker. Yeah, the land looks good. But God, we don't have enough money to do that. We don't have enough education to do that. God, we don't have enough time to do that. God, my life is too messed up. But you know what really breaks God's heart? What really breaks his heart is how they actually turn on their leaders that God's given them. These leaders, that God knows personally. And I want to be really careful here, because this is not some politician who, when it comes to election season, decides he knows Jesus just to get Christians to vote for him. And that happens, by the way. This is a man who knows God personally. This is a man who has an encounter with God on a face-to-face basis. We just talked about it last week. You see, this is the moment that an entire generation of Israelites, where the story turns fatal for them. They start talking and reminiscing about what life was like back in the old days. Back in the days when they were in Egypt. Back when they could put their trust in the ones who enslaved them because they could see them. You see, what killed them no longer looked dangerous. What killed them no longer was dangerous to them. The people were really never got to the place where they gave God everything. They never got to the place where 100% of who they were was captured by God. Deep inside of them, a little piece of Egypt still had its hold on them. And in that moment, where they could have stepped into the land God had promised to give them, they turned to Egypt instead of to Him. So guess what? God let them have what they desired. God let them have what they desired. They wanted Egypt. Guess what? Head back to Egypt. You'd rather die in the wilderness than to go forward where God asked you to go? Then you'll go ahead. You'll die in the wilderness. And for 40 years, a year for every day that the spies were in Canaan, the promised land, for every day, the people, this generation, would roam in the desert. God ultimately gives them what their desires were. They're so stubborn that even after they hear this from God, they decide they're going to do their own thing and try to go into the promised land. You know what happens to them? They get beat. They get beat right off the bat by the armies in the Canaan. They're so stubborn. The reality is, we can refuse the life that God has created for us. We can refuse the life that God has created for us. He's given us the option. We can refuse it. If that's what we want, He'll let us have it. Wanting to live the life God created us to live is so much more than just words. It's so much more than just the vicious cycle. It is coming to grips with what our deepest desires are. You see, what was revealed here with the people of Israel when they finally came to the edge of the promised land, when they were up against what they thought was an insurmountable obstacle in their path, what they thought was insurmountable, and the end of their rope, what revealed was their deepest desires. Our deepest desires. Our deepest desires reveal whether or not we fully trust God with our lives. Our deepest desires tell us a lot about who we are. When the waves crash against our lives, when the masks actually have to come off, when life throws all kinds of things at us, it will reveal what matters most to us. Interesting. 2 weeks ago, or a week and a half ago, October 10th, I believe it was, Hurricane Michael roared onto the shores of the panhandle of Florida. Tuesday night, we all went to bed thinking it was a Category 3 and maybe there would be some water damage, but nobody really knew for sure. And by Wednesday morning, The winds had increased by over 30 miles an hour. In 24 hours, it had increased in over 30 miles an hour to now a high end of a Category 4 storm. And it roared to shore. There was a pastor by the name of Terrence Bulger. When the winds hit his home, ripped through the windows, tore off the ceiling of his house, and the walls began to cave in. Who Terrence Bulger really was revealed. Take a listen to this video. He began to sing words. Thank you, Lord. In the midst of losing everything, the wall is caving in, the challenge that was before him. And it's not that God isn't big enough to handle our doubts and our fears and our anxiety. But it's coming to grips with the process, right? In the midst of the process of learning to trust him. What this revealed was Terrence's deepest desire. What this revealed is what mattered most to Terrence. It is a process. No guarantee of easy living. No guarantee of no sorrow. No guarantee that we won't have fear or anxiety. But a process to bring us into a deeper relationship with the Creator of the world. A place where we trust him. You see, God was forming a people who would trust him for everything. So that they would be a reminder to the whole world of what he is capable of doing. That they would begin to see the world as he sees it. That they would trust him to supply their needs. You see, when we trust God to supply our needs, like our needs for living, we no longer see people through a filter of fear. When we trust God to supply our needs, we no longer see other people through a filter of anxiety, through a filter of scarcity, through a filter of comfort. We see the world through his love. We see the world through the eyes of Jesus. This is what happens to the people of Israel. They came to this place and they could not see the world as what God could make it. They could only see the world as it was. You see, the promised land is what could be because of what God can do. The promised land, right? What is ahead of us, becoming more like Jesus. The promised land, being and living the life we've been created to live. This is what could be because of what God can do. But a lot of us get stuck between what can be and what God can do with wondering what might happen. Don't get stuck at what might happen. Step into the life that God has created you to live. Not on your own power, but because of what God can do. And finally, this morning, we've been created to live a life where our deepest satisfaction comes from God alone. This is the life we've been created to live. A life where we depend on Him. Our joy, our deep satisfaction comes from Him. You want to talk about freedom? Do you know what that sets us free from? When our deepest satisfaction comes from Him alone. That's the promised land. The promised land is what could be because of what God can do. Let's stand together. I'm going to ask you to bow your heads and close your eyes just for a moment. I want us to enter into a moment of prayer and reflection today. And I want to ask you some questions. Maybe there's something that's been in one of the songs today or in the scripture we've read. Maybe it's been in something someone has said to you. Maybe it's been something this week where God has spoken through somebody into your life. But right now, I want to ask you this. Are you refusing to live the life that God has created you to live? Maybe there is a reason for it. Maybe you've been hurt by religion. Maybe you've been hurt by the church. Maybe somebody else in your life has hurt you and you're so angry at them and the bitterness is so real. And so this is what's keeping you, holding you back from the life that God has created you to live. Are you refusing to live that life? Second, what are your deepest desires today? Like with your eyes closed and just for a moment, it's just you and God, right? There's nobody else that can hear your thoughts but you and God. What are your deepest desires? Do you find your satisfaction in God alone? Or is there something else satisfying you? Is there something else that you're chasing for that satisfaction? Finally, are you fully trusting God for every area of your life? Every area. Are you seeing the world as it could be? Do you see your life as it could be because of what God can do? Don't be afraid of the process. Don't give up because of the process. Trust Him fully because of the process. Let's pray together. Father, I sense that you are speaking in a very real way this morning to us in this room. Again, in a story that reminds us, human beings, the extent you are willing to go with your love to break through into our lives. How much you love us. God, I pray that if there's someone in here who is refusing to give you their life, who is refusing to trust you, maybe it's unforgiveness that is clouding their mind, bitterness that's clouding their mind, confusion, fear. I pray that today would be the day they would step into the promised land of giving you their life. That they would go with you on a new journey. That they would turn the page in a new chapter. And they would begin today. God, I pray that if there's someone in this room who's holding back, they've been playing the Christian game, the church game, today would be the start of something new, a new beginning. God, I pray that every one of us would come to trust you more deeply, even in the midst of the process. For it's in your name I pray. Amen.